All right, okay, welcome back to the Tea, Coffee, and Fantasy Football podcast. Last week we talked about quarterback rankings, and now we're going to be talking, Jacob and I are going to be talking about our running back rankings for this year.
All right.
Who do you have
So
running back one?
it's I think this is pretty obvious. It's obviously Christian McCaffrey. Who's yours?
Yeah, I had McCaffrey too. Just like last year, he was insane. I guess like without any catches, he would have been running back one last year. And with catches alone, he finished as a wide receiver 20. So he's just head and heels above the competition.
Yeah, I think you got to project some regression for him. Like 50 rushing for 15 touchdowns, I don't think that's always a bit of a red flag for regression. And but keep in mind there is a chance he could actually see more targets. Keep in mind he had 141 last year. And with Teddy Bridgewater being a check down magnet or game manager, he could see more than 150. So his targets may not regress, which is scary.
His targets every year of his career has gone up. So 113 is rookie, 124 is second year, and then 141 last year. So if it follows this trend, he could easily get over 150 receptions, which is just insane.
Yeah. And while what's the last time an RB1 repeated as RB1? Do you know?
I do not know that. We probably pulled it up though, but it's
Let me check.
starting in 2008. There's been no repeating RB1s.
Yeah. So just because there is a lot of variability in fantasy in general, well, I wouldn't necessarily project CMC to be RB1. I think he has the best chance, if that makes sense. I think he has less than a 50% chance of repeating, just partly in case he gets hurt or Saquon goes off. But if I'm going to bet on someone to be RB1, it's Christian.
Yes, and you mentioned Saquon, but Saquon's my running back too. Last year he's the best running back in the NFL skill wise, and last year he had a really serious ankle injury, but still finished as RB6 in terms of points per game. And I think this year Daniel Jones is getting better, and so is the offensive line, which is only going to help Barkley. And then as well, Jason Garrett's the new coach from Dallas, and in Dallas he helped Zeke a lot with lots of rushing and then more passing opportunities, which should only help Barkley.
Yeah, and the thing is, his rookie season when he was fully healthy, Barkley saw 121 targets. So Christian McCaffrey is the best receiving back in football, but keep in mind Barkley's not that far behind. And last year, he was hurt, and just watching him play, he really wasn't. He just wasn't the same. But once he got hot down the stretch last season, like I know for you, he basically won you your fantasy championship in weeks 15 and 16.
In our league by like 15 points, and Barkley had like 54 points the championship week and then like 30 the week before. So he just carried my team in the playoffs.
Yeah. So, and also one thing, the way the Giants, I feel like they should design their offense is to get for Daniel Jones to get the ball out quickly, because if he has to hold on to the ball too long, he doesn't sense pressure well. So that's calling for more quick check downs to Saquon, more screens. So that way I really feel he could repeat his 121 targets from his rookie season, because he is an amazing receiver out of the backfield. He's probably the second best receiving back in the league then.
For sure, yeah. After McCaffrey.
Yeah.
So my running back three, probably the same this year, is Zeke. He's probably the safest player in all fantasy. He's never finished below running back 5. And then he has hit RB2 like weekly numbers in 93% of his games, which is just insanely high. So if you want like someone who's going to put up great performances week in and week out, that's Zeke.
Yeah. Only once last year did he score less than 10 points in PPR format. That is mind blowing.
That's like the highest floor you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, I agree with you that he is the safest player in the draft, and he'll still be seeing a decent amount of targets with running backs. You don't want them to just be one trick ponies. You want them to see, for these top guys, I want to see them at least 50 targets at least. And Zeke fits the bill there. I think his targets still might go down from the 71 he had last year with the addition of CeeDee Lamb, but he's still a good enough receiver out of the backfield to.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are worrying about Mike McCarthy being there. He likes to pass, but then I think when you have such a good running back and then the same offensive coordinator, I don't think it's going to change the game plan much at all.
Yeah, and Mike McCarthy has basically said they'll be sticking with mostly Kellen Moore's playbook. They don't want these guys to learn an entirely new offense. Mm-hmm. And so recently I did some projections for point totals, just giving some ranges. I think Zeke is definitely the safest player in the class.
For sure. My running back for, I guess 1 through 4 is pretty given, but my running back 4 is Alvin Kamara.
Yes, he's a guy I'm expecting a bounce back season from, because last year, like Saquon, he was hurt for most of it.
Yeah, I read that he I think it was a tore. He either sprained or tore his MCL week 6, and he played an entire season with it, which is just insane.
Yeah, and his efficiency also took a hit then. Mm-hmm. Historically, rookie season, he saw about 8 yards per target, 10 yards per catch. 2018, he saw about 7 yards per target, 8.7 yards per catch. And last year, he saw 5.5 yards per target and 6.5 yards per catch.
And I think another thing that went down with him is his touchdowns. Last year, he only had 6 touchdowns, but then in the years before, he had 12 and 18 touchdowns, respectively. So like, that number is bound to go up.
Yeah. And the Saints really like to target Kamara. They love to target Kamara and Michael Thomas on third down. And Drew Brees, with his arm strength being limited right now at this point in his career, he's going to love throwing to Kamara, who is an outstanding receiver.
And I know there was the recent news with the whole possible holdout from Kamara and that the Saints were open to trade him. But personally, I don't think that's anything to worry about. And that would, I guess, cause his value to fall in some drafts, which would be really good.
Yeah. And I think the Saints putting Kamara on the trade block, like they said, it was more just to see if anyone was going to blow them away. I think they were kind of hoping Bill O'Brien was going to offer an entire draft class, maybe.
Probably will.
Yeah.
I'll trade Deshaun Watson for Alvin Kamara.
Yeah. Speaking of Deshaun Watson, no, this is on for discussion day, but yeah, he signed his 4-year, $160 million extension.
It's the second highest paid player, which is insane.
Yeah. So
smart though, because like the quarterback contracts are going up and up every year, so like they kind of got him for a bargain in 4 years.
Yeah. By the time that's up, that might be a like market value.
Yeah.
For an average quarterback. And we'll see how much Dak's going to get on his, because if Deshaun's making 40, I can't imagine that Jerry Jones is going to want to sign Dak for more than that.
Yeah, it'll probably be like around that range.
Yeah, but Deshaun Watson is – I think Deshaun Watson is almost kind of a better version of Dak Prescott. So
he's a mobile Dak.
Sorry, what?
He's a mobile version of Dak.
Dak's pretty mobile, but Deshaun Watson is a little more athletic, has a bit of a stronger arm, is a little bit more accurate, just everything a bit better than Dak does.
Yeah. So I guess we're going on to the next tier of running backs. So probably our rankings are going to differ. But my running back 5 is Derrick Henry.
Ooh. This is PPR?
Yes.
My running back 5 is Dalvin Cook. And I technically have him in the same tier as Zeke and Kamara, but I think there's a hidden tier there because with Dalvin, you're also worried about injury.
Mm-hmm.
But last season, he brought a really high floor, almost Zeke-esque in every single one of his games that he didn't play hurt, that he wasn't hurt. He had more than 10 points in PPR format.
Yeah, I like Cook a lot. He's going to do even better with Diggs. I only put Henry above him. Cook was my running back 6. The only reason why I put Cook there was just because of his injury history. Like, he's been injured every single year, including the playoffs. He would have screwed you over if you would have drafted him last year. And, like, I don't really want to waste a first-round pick on someone who could very well get injured and has a history of getting injured.
With that, I think you're just going to have to gamble that he gets hurt maybe early in the season, like Saquon, then gets healthy enough for the last quarter of the season when you really need him, because it was kind of the opposite with Dalvin from Saquon last year, because I had Dalvin on my team last year. I got him in the 3rd round, and he was really killing it until after their Week 12 bye. They started putting him on a pitch count. He had played 44% of the snaps in Week 13 against Seattle, 47 in Detroit, and then 43 against the Chargers. So he just wasn't really healthy.
Yeah, I think if you end up drafting Cook, you need to draft Madison as your handcuff because he's probably one of the most valuable handcuffs in fantasy.
Yeah. And for running backs who are injury prone, I do believe in handcuffs. Like, I really think you should draft Latavius Murray at if you take Kamara. Just Kamara has been injured, and you want that. For Zeke, I don't think you need a handcuff because I don't think he's even missed a game due to injury. So
he missed 2, like his rookie year. But other than that, he hasn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reason why I put Henry as running back 5 was just his rushing ability gives him a super high floor. And then like his touchdowns may go down. He had a lot last year, but Dion Lewis left and he had 25 receptions. So I think the majority of the receptions are going to go to Henry, which gives him some receiving upside. And he's not at all.
I think the receptions might go more to a Darrington Evans rookie out of Baylor, who I think they did kind of take to be their Dion Lewis replacement. He's a similar sort of quick, fast, athletic. No, Darrington Evans, he went to Appalachian State. Never mind. But I don't think they're going to use Derrick Henry much out of the backfield just because he's not a very good receiving back.
Where do you have Henry ranked?
I have him as my RB10. He's in this next tier with like 10 other running backs, so where I feel they're all pretty close. There's not a huge gap between my RB6 and RB14.
So you would not take Henry in the first round at all?
I wouldn't do it. I see why you would, but I think there is also some room for regression also with teams figuring out Tennessee's offense. For example, I think Henry's production will also be tied to Ryan Tannehill, who is also a huge candidate for regression. Stop the play action. They'll be able to slow down Henry, and I think his efficiency will go down from the 5 yards per carry, which is really high that we've seen previously, but he's still going to get probably 300 carries.
So my running back 7 is Joe Mixon. So last year he has all the opportunities. For the past 2 years, he's one of only 5 running backs to have 1,000 yards rushing and 32 receptions. But he's been unable to produce, not because he's a bad player, but just because the offense is terrible. Like, they were dead last in most categories, which affected Mixon. But now this year with Burrow, I think that the passing offense is going to be better, which is going to open up opportunities for Mixon.
I think Mixon is my RB6, and I really think he's up for a bounce back year. He is, and he signed his 4-year, $48 million extension, which I know we say not to pay running backs, but that still, I think, is a good deal because he is maybe top 5 talent in the league. He really is a phenomenal player. And I know he finishes RB13 last year, which was a little disappointing, but you got to imagine that he's going to see more targets. He saw only 45 last year. I'd imagine that's going to go up with Burrow. I mean, Burrow spent a lot of LSU throwing to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I imagine he's going to do the same with Mixon. Mm-hmm. And his offensive line is now a little bit better. They're getting their first-round rookie from a couple of years ago, Jonah Williams, back from injury at left tackle. That should help. I believe they still somehow have Bobby Hart at right, which is going to hurt, but just don't run to that side of the field.
Yeah. So who is your running back, Seven?
I really rose on him in the last couple of days.
Let's see who it is.
Austin Ekeler.
Oh.
I mean, I think when I crush the numbers, he's just going to see so many catches and targets. I think they'll take a dip from what they were last year because Phillip Rivers likes to throw to his running backs. That's just a thing with them. But even so, they're going to use him as a receiver too.
Yeah, I was super high on Ekeler too. I lowered him, but with the 4 games without Gordon, he finished as a running back too. And then when Gordon returned, Ekeler only had 4 games more than 10 carries. So Gordon's now gone. So that means more carries for Ekeler. So I think he has a super high ceiling with added carries, and then there's always the receiving threat. He almost had 1,000 yards receiving.
Yeah, and also, while there is, I think Ekeler might regress in terms of the targets he's going to receive. Justin Herbert, if they play him, Herbert threw, I'm not joking, a quarter of his passes were screens at Oregon. So
if they announced that Taylor's going to start the entire year.
True. For some reason, I really feel this is going to be almost a situation where Taylor starts for maybe the first half of the season, and then they put in Herbert if they're 2-5 and want to spark just to see what he's got.
Yeah, but I like Ekeler a lot. I think he goes in the mid-second round, early third in most drafts. So if you can get someone there who's going to maybe be top 5, that's great value for him.
Yeah, that's true. And if I got Ekeler in the 3rd round, personally, I'd be running around in circles. And also, I think, Ekeler, I don't think he's going to see 200 carries. Mm-hmm. I think they're still going to run mostly a committee because Ekeler's efficiency in the ground game is more – Ekeler's production in the ground game is based more off his efficiency rather than him getting a workload like Derrick Henry.
So my running back 8 is Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I have him as RB9. I have Josh Jacobs ahead of him. Some of these guys are neck and neck. Depends if you want upside. For example, I'd probably take Edwards-Helaire over Josh Jacobs. Mm-hmm. But if you're already secure at RB1, say you got Zeke or something, and you wanted a safe RB2, I'd go with Josh Jacobs there.
Yeah, the Edwards-Helaire hype is insane. I've seen him go top 5 in a lot of drafts. But I guess some of it's kind of warranted. Like he's in the perfect situation for a running back. He's the lead back with no Damian Williams. He has Patrick Mahomes in the league's best offense. And then Andy Reid's just a running back. He can get running backs to produce with Brian Westbrook, Kareem Hunt in his rookie year, and LaShawn McCoy. And I guess since he's a workhorse back, it's going to be a lot of touchdowns. But the only thing holding me back from drafting Helaire earlier, like maybe even running back 5, It's just the fact that he's a rookie, so he can easily just be a bust. But he can easily be top five at the same time.
I I think rookie wide receivers are more prone to bust in fantasy redraft because rookie running backs, if they're really good, they'll produce like we saw with Josh Jacobs last year. I think Edwards-Helaire, well, I don't think he's really going to rush for more than 1,000 yards just because the Chiefs tend to like to do a bit of a more of a committee to just so one player isn't burdened with 250 carries. I think he could catch like 60 passes out of the backfield because he's a really good receiver.
But I think like last year they did a committee. But this year, I don't think there's gonna be any chance of a committee since Damian Williams opted out. And then I guess the next man up is Darwin Thompson, and he really isn't a factor at all. He has 25 carries or something in 2 years. So like I don't think they're gonna. I think it's gonna be a majority of the snaps are gonna go to Hilaire.
And I think they're also going to use Daryl Williams, who filled in when Damian Williams was hurt last year. I think we'll see maybe an 80-20 split between the two
Mm-hmm.
because it's a good idea to keep your running backs fresh. And that's part of the reason I'm a little concerned about Derrick Henry, who I have as my RB10, by the way, is just the insane workload he's getting might run him into the ground sooner than we think.
So why do you have Josh Jacobs so high?
Um, the Raiders have talked a lot about getting him involved in the passing game, while I don't really think he's going to see I don't think he's just going to automatically see 50 targets this year. The Raiders run their offense almost through him. They want to run the ball, create manageable third downs for Derek Carr, and I really think they should use Josh Jacobs more in the receiving game.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they do want to keep him fresh for between the tackles, but I mean, still.
I put Jacobs as my running back 13. I think he has a super high floor because he's a great rusher. He did really well last year. He had a shoulder injury too, but he still did well. But my only, I guess, downside with him is the receiving work. Like you mentioned, they drafted Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards. He's going to take some targets, and then they also extended Jalen Richard, who was the main pass catching back. So I just don't think that Jacobs has the top 10 upside just because just because of the lack of passing work.
That's true. If he gets more than 50 targets, he is an RB1. I know earlier I said that I want my first round running backs to see more than 50 targets. And I think the 27 targets Jacobs saw last year is the floor. And keep in mind, he only played 13 games. So over a 16-game season, that'd be 32, 33 targets. And with Derek Carr also being kind of a check down magnet, his average at the target is near the bottom of the league. And I think Josh Jacobs might be used more in that role. But even as just a pure runner, he's going to see pretty much all the goal line touches.
For sure. So your running back 9 was Hilaire, right?
Yes.
Mine is Kenyon Drake. So I guess Arizona's running back heaven because running backs last in Arizona, they ranked third in fantasy points per touch. And when Drake took over, he finished as a running back 4. And DeAndre Hopkins is only going to open up things for Drake. And then additionally, Arizona traded away his main competition in David Johnson. So like putting all those factors together, I can easily see Drake being a top 5 running back this year.
Yeah, Drake has a ton of upside. He's grouped with Drake is my RB11. He's grouped with Miles Sanders, who I have right behind him at RB12 as guys who there's a chance they may not see 1,000 yards on the ground, but they bring a pretty decent floor as good receivers, and they could be and they're both in offenses that could be really explosive next season.
Mhm.
And I mean, I mean, Drake, I think will play a similar role to David Johnson for sure. And the thing is, he has very little competition. Chase Edmonds is just a relief pitcher, a decent backup to start in case he gets hurt. But after that, they really don't have any competition for him.
Benjamin, but that was in the 7th round, so I doubt he's going to be much of an option.
Sorry, what?
They drafted Benjamin, but that was in the 7th round, so I doubt he's going to be much of competition at all.
Yeah, true. And also with the air raid system, they'll want running backs who are able to catch the ball out of the backfield, and Drake can do that.
My running back 10, I think he's the same as yours, but it's Nick Chubb.
I have Derrick Henry as my RB10. I have Nick Chubb as my RB13.
Oh, never mind.
Which is lower than I've had him before. I really used to like him, but the Kareem Hunt just stealing all the targets is kind of souring me on him because I don't think he's going to see more than 30 targets this year if Kareem Hunt plays the whole season.
That's true, but then I don't know. I think the narrative that Kareem Hunt is like outscoring him is kind of false. Like when you look into it, because I guess a really insane stat. I forgot the exact numbers, but during the second half of the season, Chubb ranked 3rd in goal line carries inside the 5-yard line, but he only scored on 2 of those carries. So like, if he scores more, his touchdowns are going to go up because just touchdowns are going to go up in general. And then with Hunt, he actually had more 100-yard rushing games. And then the new head coach, Stefanski, he worked with Cook in Minnesota. So he's just going to feed Chubb the ball a ton like he did with Cook.
Yeah, I think Nick Chubb as a rusher presents – I think Chubb could seriously rush for 1,600 yards and 14 touchdowns, which would be really, really good. But I flat out do not think he's going to see more than 30 targets, which really lowers his floor and ceiling.
I agree with you on that, but I think his rushing ability is enough to put him at this spot, personally.
Even if he rushes for 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns, the season I think he's going to have, coupled with, I only think he might have maybe 20 catches and for 150 yards. That only puts him at just 235 fantasy points on the season.
So that would have made him what? That's like an RB 11, 12 type numbers.
Yeah, and the reason I have Josh Jacobs higher is just because I think there's more target upside with Josh Jacobs. I don't think Josh Jacobs is going to see less targets than he saw last year, but I really think Chubb's targets are going to get cut in half.
Yeah.
I mean, Kareem Hunt is just a better receiver, and I think they're gonna use it.
I think that the Browns are actually going to use him as their wide receiver 3, or like line him up in the slot just because there's no one else there.
Yeah, that's true. And for that, when we maybe get to Kareem Hunt, I'll talk about how we could play Tariq Cohen, James White sort of role on your team if you need something like that.
So my running back 11 is Miles Sanders.
He's my RB12, and the reason I slighted Kenyon Drake over him is that the Eagles do like to run a committee, and while you're not sure who it's gonna be, probably Boston Scott at this point, that's something they historically like to do.
Yeah, I think a fun fact about that was in Peterson's 4 years of head coaching, he's only had a running back carry it 20 times on 6 different occasions. So he does
True.
in their Super Bowl run, he has a history of using committees.
Yeah. But what pushes him up for me is his receiving ability. He had 50 catches last season, and that's even with him not really getting the ball until the last half of the season. I think he'll still see a lot of those targets because I believe the Eagles tried to add a bunch of deep threats in the offseason because that was their clear, glaring issue. But Jalen Rager's a rookie, and Deshaun Jackson is getting older. I think they'll be effective, and I think that'll still help Sanders open things up for Sanders as a receiver too. But I don't think they're going to really steal targets away from him either.
Mm-hmm. I think the reason why I put him where I did is that he's just a truly elite talent. Because since 2000, 61 players, including Sanders, have put up 800 rushing yards and 500 receiving yards in a season. And guess where Sanders ranked in touches?
Where?
61st out of 61st. So he had so little carries and so little work, but he still put up truly elite numbers. And I think if Peterson caves in and makes him the lead workhorse back, he could easily replicate those numbers and become like a top 5, top 3 even running back.
True. And plus, it doesn't hurt to have Carson Wentz throwing you passes. Yeah. So who's your RB13 then?
Are we on running back 12 or?
Sanders was my RB12. I have Chubb as RB13. Who's yours?
My running back 12 is Eckler. My running back 13 is Jacobs.
All right. Who's your RB14 then?
Yeah, so I guess on all the people we've listed recently are in the same tier. So my tiers go the first 4, and then Henry, Mixon, Cook, Hilaire, Drake in the second tier. And the third tier is Chubb, Sanders, Eckler, and Jacobs. And now in the fourth tier, the first one, my running back 14 is Todd Gurley. I'm a lot higher on him than you are. Where do you have him?
I have Gurley as my RB20. I have him as my RB20.
Wow. I don't know. I think the big knack against him is he has knee arthritis, but that hasn't limited him at all. Because the last 5 games last season, he had 98 carries. So and the Rams' offensive line was terrible, and he still put up great numbers. And now he's going in Atlanta. He has a good offensive line and absolutely no competition. And Atlanta loves using the running backs. They average almost 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns a year. So Gurley's going to get all of that, and there's no competition. I think he's just going to have a great, even maybe top 10 season.
That's true. I think he'll probably see north of 200 carries. His efficiency did take a dip last season. You could be willing to attribute that to a terrible offensive line, but what brings Gurley down is his receiving, which has sort of dropped off from seeing 81 targets in 14 games in 2018 to just 49 in 15 games in 2019. So I think he's just going to be used mostly between the tackles and just as a workhorse, but then they don't want to add too much on him as a receiver because the Rams were trying to kind of manage his workload last year. Mm-hmm. But I think he could still rush for 1,000 yards.
Easily. Who do you have as your running back 14?
I have Aaron Jones, and he marks the end of the tier where I had my RB6, Joe Mixon, down to my RB14, Aaron Jones. I know you're also not so high on Jones, but I think the Aaron Jones hate has gone a little far. I wouldn't take him in the first round. Probably wouldn't even take him in the second. But as a receiver, he's still a decent receiver out of the backfield. And with the Packers refusing, for some reason, to add a single weapon for Rodgers, Aaron Jones will still probably see more than 70 targets.
Mm-hmm. I had Jones as RB16. He had a great season last year, but part of that was due to he had 18 touchdowns, which is super hard to replicate. And then another reason why I'm pretty low on him this year is that it seems like LaFleur wants, I don't know, like to have a committee because like why didn't you draft Dillon in the second round? Who's going to take goal line carries?
Right. Even if he regresses to 900 yards, say he has 7 touchdowns, contributes 45 catches, 400 yards, a couple touchdowns, he still has that still equates to 231 points in PPR. So I think his receiving actually boosts him a fair amount. I do agree that his touchdowns will he probably won't score half as many touchdowns as he did in 2019. That's just not repeatable. And the Packers want to run a committee because they want to copy the Niners.
Yeah, so you're a Packers fan. So how do you think it's going to work between Williams, Jones, and Dillon? Like, who's going to take the receiving work? Who's going to take most of the goal line snaps and stuff like that?
I think Aaron Jones, if anything, might see more targets because A.J. Dillon is not a receiving back. Think Eddie Lacy, think Derrick Henry, and Aaron Jones is if you go receiving backs, you go Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, A.J. Dillon. And with the Packers not having an actual number 2 receiver, he'll still see those targets. That's why I've risen on him from before.
Uh-huh.
But I think A.J. Dillon will probably vulture a bunch of touchdowns from Aaron Jones. But there's a chance Jones sees less than 200 carries. Hopefully LaFleur sees he's just too good a player to keep off the field.
So my running back 15 was Chris Carson. Last year before his injury, he was on pace for running back 12. And then he's just a workhorse in one of the best running offenses in the league. And he doesn't have like much competition. Carlos Hyde is washed. DJ Dallas isn't much of a factor, and Rashad Penny is injury prone. So like, I think there's room for a lot of carries.
I have Chris Carson as my RB18. I'm not as high on him. I'm a little bit concerned about his injuries. He's been hurt, albeit not for very long, but each of the past couple seasons. I think there's a chance. I'm just worried about the Seahawks sort of running a committee as well, because keep in mind Penny was a first-round pick. Oh, I mean the same year as Chris Carson, but Chris Carson just turned out to be better. But I think they're still going to try to get Penny involved. Carlos Hyde, I think, will probably play a miniaturized version of Chris Carson's role. I'm not sure how DJ Dallas is going to fit into this. I haven't really looked into him.
He was a 6th or 7th round pick, so I don't think he'll be that big of an issue.
Let me check. I thought he went a little higher than that. He was a 4th round pick.
Oh, never mind then.
Out of Miami. So there's always a chance he could be a factor. The Seahawks, again, like to run their committees. So there's a chance Carson busts. So I wouldn't really take him as anything more than pretty solid RB3.
Okay. And then I guess my last running back in this tier is James Conner. So Conner would be my running back 17.
I have Conner as my RB15, and I've also really risen on him just for his receiving work. He is injury prone, more so probably than Chris Carson. Last year, he, as someone who had him on his fantasy team, disappeared at the most important part of the season.
Yeah, I love Conner. He's shown like he'd be a top 10 fantasy running back. I picked him up in 2018 off the waivers, and he proceeded to help me win the league championship. And last year, before his injuries in Big Ben, he was on pace for 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns, which I think that's the top 10 finish too. And like the head coach said that they want to use a workhorse back, and that's Tomlin. So I'm not going to buy in, I guess, to the fear that they're going to have a committee of Samuels and McFarland.
Yeah, I think McFarland out of Maryland is an intriguing option. He's really talented. He's really fast, and so I think he could maybe play more of a home run threat. But I still think Connor will still see the bulk of the catches. And this isn't an offense where Big Ben's arm strength or elbow isn't going to be what it used to be. So more quick passes to James Conner, which in PPR format is very valuable.
Yeah, and I guess Tomlin. Let me just read you this quote by stupid ass by Tomlin. Or let me try to find it. I don't know. I guess the quote by Tomlin was just gonna say that they use workhorse backs to like to get a rhythm going, and like Connor is gonna be their guy. So if everything goes good and there's no injuries, like you said, injuries are a problem, but I think Connor could finish as a 10th or a top 10 back, barring no injuries.
True. I would be a little scared to take him as an RB2 just because of the injuries, but if I could get him as my RB3, I would be ecstatic because because then he could start in the flex because then he'd probably be a flex start, and if he gets hurt, you can just draft a receiver there. So it's not a huge risk.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, he's going in what, the fifth round? So I think he's great value compared to some of the other running backs.
I'm looking at his ADP. He's going as he's now going closer to pick 22. So he's losing some of the value appeal, but still.
It's like mid second round, early third. Wow.
Yeah. So think about it. As an RB3, he's gold.
Yeah. So now we have a tier gap, and personally, I don't want to draft any of these running backs. My running back too. Like my strategy for running backs is to get the running backs in the first 2 rounds, or at least 2 out of the 3 rounds to get running backs, because I don't want to get any of these running backs on the list now. What about you? What's your strategy?
My strategy, Aaron Jones is about as low as I go for RB2. I might, if I'm desperate, I might take James Conner if there's nobody else and there's a huge drop off between him and the next guys available. But typically, draft a running back in the first round, and even if you might see one of these guys like Aaron Jones may fall to the third, which would be a solid pickup, or like Kenny and Drake or Miles Sanders. I've had them fall to the third. I once had Joe Mixon fall to the third in the best draft I could ever ask for.
I don't know what happens, honestly.
In an NFL public league. I have to talk about this because let me pull it up. I still don't understand how it happened. Oh, shoot. I think NFL.com's having trouble. Hang on.
But yeah, while that's going, I can talk about one of the drafts I had at NFL.com. I was picking from the 6th spot, and I was like, oh, I don't know who to pick. But then the guy before me took Drew Lock with the 5th pick. So I got Alvin Kamara with the 6th pick. He proceeded to take Brady in the 3rd round, Philip Lindsay in the 4th. So I ended up with Kamara, Mixon, Godwin, Robinson, Kyler Murray, A.J. Brown on my bench, Keenan Allen. It was just insane.
Wow. And, like, yeah, and you know how much I love Drew Lock this season, but, I mean, come on. 5th pick is still a little rich for my blood there.
Way too rich. If you're taking him in the 10th round, that's still too early.
All right. Let's see if I can remember what the draft. So, first pick, I had the 4th pick. The first pick was Christian. And I'm thinking, okay, this is pretty standard. And the 2nd pick is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, at this point, I'm thinking, okay, I can, at this point, say pick 3 is Saquon. I'll have and then I'll just be able to take Zeke. Mm-hmm. So, as my RB1, who's the safest player in the draft. So, I'm good with that. Pick 3 is Michael Thomas. And I'm running around in circles because I just got Saquon Barkley. So I take Saquon, long story short. 7th pick is Lamar Jackson.
Yikes.
And keep in mind, fifth and sixth were Adams and Julio.
Oh,
Dalvin Cook went 8. Tom Brady went 9. I'm pretty sure he was a bandwagon fan because he only drafted Patriots, Niners, and Bucks players,
wow.
and pick 10 was Cam Newton. So I'm going crazy at this point. The draft goes on.
With like 11 must be insanely happy.
Man, I was so happy. Deshaun Watson went pick 13. Zeke fell to 14. I was picking 16. I was this close to getting him.
You got Barkley and Zeke.
Man, I'm sorry, there were still a lot of really good running backs. Like Mixon was still on the board at 17, but a lot of receivers had gone. I decided to take Hopkins at 17, and I'd maybe get a decent running back in the third. And Mixon somehow fell to my lap in the third.
That is insane.
Who's my RB6? Mixon's really one of my guys, and I really can't believe that I got him there. And then that was one of the best drafts. I even got Calvin, one of my favorite picks. I got Calvin Ridley in the eighth round.
That's a steal.
Calvin Ridley, who I think is really one of the breakout players for this season. I know they have Julio, but it's basically a wide receiver 2 with little competition in Dirk Cutter's offense, which Dirk Cutter historically loves to pass the ball. Man.
But yeah, going back to running backs, are we on running back 19 now? Or 18?
I believe let me tell you my running back 16. It's Le'Veon.
Okay, I have, or you could talk about him and I could say where I have him.
Oh, sure. Well, where do you have him?
I have an 18.
I think he brings a high floor as a receiver. That's mostly why I have him. But there is some weird stuff going on between him and Adam Gase.
Yeah.
Rumors of that 60-40 split. I still think he'll still probably see more than 70 targets. And his efficiency at yards per carry was atrocious last season at 3.2. So with a better offensive line, you'd imagine that's going to go up. If it goes back up to 4, that he would be a legitimate RB2.
Yeah, I think he has the potential. Like, he has all the talent in the world. But the only things that I don't like about his situation is, first, that he's in New York. So,
yeah, the Jets.
Terrible. The offense is absolutely trash. And then Gase is saying, Frank Gore is going to get a lot of carries. So, I don't even know what to say about it. It's just so weird what's happening in the situation.
I'd imagine Gore's mostly going to get the goal line work.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a huge knock on Le'Veon because Le'Veon only scored 3 rushing touchdowns last season.
Oh, wow.
And 1 receiving. So you'd expect some positive regression, at least in the receiving department. But even if he only scores 3 touchdowns, if his efficiency goes up, also because he's not being run to the ground as much, I still think that's a bit of a plus.
Who is your running back 17?
I have Melvin Gordon. I think he's going to see 2/3, 1/3 split with Phillip Lindsay. I think his efficiency will increase too because he was behind one of the worst offensive lines last year. But also there is the thing that of him getting older and running backs having short shelf lives. That's why I'm a little hesitant to draft him. I'd be fine with him as an RB3, but I'd be a little scared if he was an RB2.
I am really low on Gordon. He's my running back 22.
Ooh.
As a Broncos fan, I'm going to avoid him at all costs because from everything that I've read, it's going to be like a 50-50 split and that they're just going to ride whoever's hot at the moment. So, it's just going to be so unpredictable week to week. I just don't know who's going to get the majority of the carries. I would rather get Lindsay, who's going 5 or 6 rounds later.
I'm a little higher on Gordon, I guess, than you, just because I think he's a good receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll I think he'll still see, you'll almost guaranteed see more than 50 targets, even if he's not the hot hand running back that week,
I don't
most
know.
weeks.
I'm worried about that with the targets too, because the offense is so crowded. They have Fant and Sutton and Judy, and then like Hamler and Patrick too. So like red zone targets can be hard to come by.
That's true. He only had one receiving touchdown last year. I expect his rushing touchdowns to regress from the 8 he had in 12 games last year to maybe, I wouldn't imagine he's going to have more than 6.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say he's going to get a ton of goal line carries. I think Drew Lock is going to blow up this season.
So who is your next running back?
That's where I have Chris Carson.
Okay, and you're low on him because of his injury history and just the competition there.
Injuries are a little bit of a concern, but I am mostly kind of worried about the competition and the Seahawks' tendencies to ride the hot hand. Even if so, Chris Carson is mostly just going to have to be pretty consistently good for him to still get the workload he needs to be an RB2.